The wind moved slowly over the dry grass. Caleb, the carpenter, had just finished stacking wood near his fence. The sun was down. The sky still held some light, but the barn was already dark. Buck, Caleb's old dog, stopped mid-step. His ears pointed toward the barn. He growled, low and steady. Caleb wiped his hands. "What is it, boy?" Buck didn't move. Then came the sound, a sharp, short cry from inside the barn. Not a man, not an animal, a baby. Caleb grabbed the rusted lantern from the porch. The flame inside shook as he walked. Buck stayed behind, tail stiff. The barn door creaked open. Caleb stepped inside. The scent hit first. Blood, smoke, something burnt. In the far corner, under loose hay, a bundle twitched. Caleb raised the lantern. It was wrapped in animal hide. The edges were soaked red. Something inside the folds moved, then cried again. Caleb dropped to his knees. He pulled the bundle open. A baby girl. Tiny. Dust on her cheek. Her eyes opened, then shut again. Around her small wrist, tied tight, was a leather string. 5 red beads clung to it. One of them glowed faintly in the lantern light. The beaded bracelet, the first proof token. Caleb looked over his shoulder. Buck stood at the door, staring. No words, no questions. Caleb lifted the baby into his arms. Inside the cabin, Caleb moved quick. He cleared the workbench. His hands knew what to do even after all these years. He hadn't built a cradle since before the fever took his own child. Each cut of wood was sharp and fast. Each nail hit firm. Buck paced near the fire. The baby slept on a folded cloth beside him. The cradle took shape in silence. By midnight it stood finished, simple, clean, cedar sides with a round base. Caleb brushed the surface once. His fingers stopped on a knot in the wood, like a scar. He picked up the baby. She stirred but didn't wake. He set her gently into the cradle. The wind outside rose. The cabin door rattled. Buck's ears shot back. He growled again, but softer. The fire dimmed. Shadows moved on the wall. Then every horse in the village stables screamed at once. The sound rolled over the land like thunder. Caleb stood still, hand on the cradle. Buck barked once, sharp and loud. Then he ran. The beaded bracelet caught the firelight and glowed deep red. Something old had returned. The dirt road into town was dry and loud. Caleb walked slow, each bootstep sharp in the morning dust. The sun hadn't cleared the rooftops yet. Caleb carried a small leather satchel, held close to his chest. The baby slept inside it, tucked in cloth. Only the edge of the red beaded bracelet showed for a second when Caleb adjusted the strap. Buck, Caleb's dog, stayed behind. The town of Rivet Creek was quiet at first. A few shop doors creaked open. A boy pushed a broom outside the saloon. Then came Mary, the grocer's wife. Mary stepped outside her store just as Caleb passed. Mary noticed something sticking out of the satchel. Her eyes narrowed. "The feather," Mary said. "That yours?" Caleb didn't stop. "Just carrying milk." Mary watched him walk off. Mary turned, whispered to a man behind her. Soon, whispers grew. By the time Caleb reached the general store, 2 more men stood at the corner. A woman across the road crossed herself. One child pointed and asked a question. The mother pulled him away. Caleb stepped into the store. He bought a bottle of milk and some cloth. The man behind the counter stared at the satchel. "She's real. Quiet," the shopkeeper said. Caleb nodded. "She don't cry much." Caleb walked back through town. By now, eyes followed him from every porch. That evening, just before supper, a knock came at Caleb's cabin door. Sheriff Wayne stood outside. Big hat, clean boots, badge polished. Caleb opened the door halfway. The sheriff smiled. "Too wide, too slow." "Evening, Caleb," Sheriff Wayne said. "Heard you had company." Caleb stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The sheriff looked over Caleb's shoulder. "Ain't nothing wrong with helping folks," the sheriff said. Caleb didn't answer. The sheriff kept smiling. "Just, folks get curious, you know. Say you brought home a baby. Say she ain't from around here." The wind picked up, the porch boards creaked. Sheriff Wayne leaned close. "You didn't take her from somewhere, did you?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "No, Sheriff. She was left. Near the barn. I just picked her up." The sheriff's smile dropped just a little. "That right?" Sheriff Wayne tipped his hat. "Well, you take care." Then the sheriff turned and walked down the road, but the deputy stayed behind. The deputy leaned on a fence post, arms crossed. He didn't speak. He just watched. Inside, the baby stirred. Caleb stepped inside and locked the door. He checked the feather tucked in her wrap. He touched the red beaded bracelet, the proof token still tight on her wrist. That night, Caleb hammered boards over the windows. Outside, someone knocked again, but didn't wait. Caleb held the baby close and whispered her name for the first time. No one else knew it yet. "She don't look like you, Caleb." The fire burned low inside the cabin. Caleb sat on the floor, rubbing oil into an old chisel. The baby slept in the cradle near the wall. The red beaded bracelet on her wrist caught the firelight. One of the beads flickered, not just reflected, but like it had its own glow. Caleb the carpenter stood to check the window boards again. As soon as Caleb stepped away, the child cried. A short, sharp sound, not loud, but sharp enough to cut the air. Caleb turned back. The baby was already quiet again. He stood still. The cradle rocked on its own. There was no wind. Buck the dog stood near the hallway. Buck didn't growl. Buck didn't bark. Buck simply refused to enter. Every time Caleb crossed the line into the baby's room, Buck backed away. That night, the cradle rocked again, twice. Caleb placed a small log on the fire. The flame jumped. Shadows moved across the walls. The child hummed in her sleep, just a faint sound, like a lullaby without words. Caleb stepped close and touched the side of the cradle. The knot in the wood felt warm. The bracelet glowed brighter. Caleb looked at the edge of the wrap. The feather was still there, dark grey with a white tip, the second proof token, the feather. Caleb reached down and touched it. The air went still. The fire hissed, and in the flame, just for a second, a face appeared, a woman. Dark hair, painted eyes, ash on her cheeks. She blinked, then she was gone. Caleb staggered back. The feather slipped from his fingers. The cradle rocked again. Outside, wind rose, but only for a second. Buck barked once, then sat down and faced the key. Doortail still. Caleb stepped back into the room. He sat near the cradle. The baby slept with one hand raised above her head. The beads turned slowly. Caleb did not sleep that night. He sat watching the fire. The knot in the wood glowed faint red. Like an ember, the feather lay on the floor. Still, Caleb whispered something no one could hear. She blinked at him. From the fire, from the bead. The letter came at sundown. A rider from the north brought it in fast, dust still on his boots. "Sheriff." Wayne read the message twice. His face didn't change. He folded the paper, slid it into his vest, and walked outside. 3 men waited on the porch of the jailhouse. One was Deputy Klein. Sheriff Wayne gave the order quiet and firm. "If any red folk come looking for the child," Sheriff Wayne said, "we stop them at the ridge. No talk, no warning." Deputy Klein leaned back. "Reckon they'll come through." "This way?" Sheriff Wayne didn't answer. He only looked at the hills. That night, torches moved along the far ridgeline. Faint glows like fireflies, but too high, too slow. Someone was lighting signals. Deputy Klein, the youngest in town law, poured himself a drink. "They always talk about spirits and revenge," Deputy Klein said. "All smoke, no knife." "No." One laughed. At midnight, Buck barked once, then stayed quiet. Caleb stepped onto his porch. The night air smelled different, dry, sharp. He looked toward the hills, but saw only black. Inside, the baby stirred. The red beaded bracelet shifted in the dark. The baby hummed softly in her sleep. Caleb didn't go back to bed. Far off, a drumbeat echoed once, then again. The rhythm was slow. Then it stopped. Deputy Klein laughed when told about it in the morning. "Just wind thumping a barrel," Deputy Klein said. Caleb didn't respond. That evening, Deputy Klein said he was going to check the fences out near Caleb's land. He never came back. By dawn, the sheriff rode out with 2 others. They followed the tracks to the edge of the trees. The ground near the barn looked scorched, a black ring in the soil, no blood. No body. But Caleb found something at the base of the fence, a tan hat. Deputy Klein's badge still pinned to the front. The sheriff took it without a word. That night, nobody lit their porch lamps. Curtains stayed shut. Guns stayed near. Buck didn't. Park? Buck stood near the baby's door and didn't move. Inside, Caleb placed the feather, the second proof token, on the cradle's edge. The bead flickered red once, then stopped. No one spoke of Deputy Klein again. The fire burned low, the wind didn't blow, but Caleb knew they were already here. The knock came just after sunrise. Caleb opened the door to find an old man with a bundle of tools wrapped in canvas. The man wore simple clothes, dusty shirt, worn boots, soft hat. His back was bent. His voice was quiet. "I heard you do good work with cedar," the man said. "Thought I'd see it myself." Caleb, the carpenter, stepped aside. "Are you a woodworker too?" The old man nodded once. "Of a kind." Inside the shop, morning light fell on the cradle. The baby slept, her red beaded bracelet resting on her chest. The old man moved slow. He ran his hand along the cradle's edge. His fingers stopped at the carved joint near the base. "You built the cradle of return," the old man said. Caleb looked up. "What does that mean?" The old man didn't answer right away. He walked to the fire, stood beside it, then turned. "The bracelet, the feather, the medallion," the old man said. "They are not things. They are pieces." "Pieces of what?" Caleb asked. "Of a story. Of a prophecy." The old man's eyes were sharp now. "A child saved. A cradle made by loss. A warrior's gift. Each must come together. Only then does the bloodline return." Caleb glanced at the baby. Her chest rose slow. She did not stir. The old man pulled a knife from his belt. Not a weapon, but a carving blade. He crouched near the base of the cradle and carved a small shape into the wood. The blade moved quick, clean. Caleb watched in silence. The mark was a hawk with spread wings. Simple, sharp, deep. The old man stood again. "That symbol was placed on the first cradle," he said. "Long ago. You did not know it, but your hands remembered." Caleb felt the air shift. The old man turned to leave. "You've woken the bloodline," he said. "Be ready." Then the man walked down the path and vanished into the trees. That night, as the fire dimmed and the cabin fell still, Caleb checked the cradle one last time. The mark at the base glowed faint red. The bracelet shimmered beside it. Outside, Buck raised his head but didn't bark. Inside, Caleb whispered the baby's name, and the mark kept glowing. The fire cracked in the center of the circle. Shadows danced along painted faces and feathered cloaks. The stars above the ridge burned sharp and white. 200 gathered. Warriors sat cross-legged. Elders leaned on carved staffs. No one laughed. No one ate. A boy threw cedar bark into the flame. Sparks jumped. The first speaker was Tall Branch, the youngest war leader. His voice was fast and sharp. "We wait too long," Tall Branch said. "Our blood was spilled. Our child was taken. We strike now." Murmurs spread. Spears tapped against the ground. Beside him, Elder Senka stood slow. Her eyes were lined with smoke and time. "The child breathes in safety," Elder Senka said. "The mark has returned. The hawk glows again." Across the circle, another elder raised a hand. "We do not know the carpenter's heart," said Elder Ryan. "Is he a thief or a keeper?" Behind the fire, the sacred items lay on a woven cloth, the red beaded bracelet, the painted feather, and the carved medallion, the proof tokens. Each had been seen in visions. Now they sat in the hands of a stranger. Some warriors rose to their feet. One slammed a hand to his chest, another tossed ash into the flames. "His kind took from us before," a voice shouted. "What makes this one different?" The circle broke into voices. Anger, fear, doubt. Then one voice rose clear. It was a woman with silver bands in her hair. She stepped into the firelight. "The child's breath does not shake," she said. "That is how we know. She knows peace where she sleeps." The fire snapped hard, like it agreed. Silence returned. Elder Senka stepped forward again. She drew a line in the dirt. "We do not strike," she said. "We watch." Tall Branch frowned. Elder Senka raised her staff. If the carpenter is true, he will show it. If he is not, he will fall without touch. The decision was made. 200 warriors rose, no signal, no chant. Each turned to the trail. Soft steps. No words. They left the ridge before the fire died. Miles away, Caleb placed a new log on the cabin fire. The baby slept near the hearth. The hawk carving on the cradle base glowed faintly. Buck raised his head once, then rested it again. Outside, shadows moved along the tree line. Quiet shapes between trees. Painted faces behind tall grass. Blades stayed sheathed. No torches, no tracks. The circle had formed. They would watch for 3 nights. If the signs were wrong, they would burn the place clean. But if the child woke without fear, if the tokens stayed whole, if the fire stayed fed, they would know. They won't enter, unless he fails. The wind was still when Caleb opened his eyes. The fire had gone to embers. Buck stood stiff near the door, ears up, tail low. Then the sound came, low, steady chanting from far off. No words, just rhythm, just breath, just pulse. Caleb, the carpenter, stepped to the window. Torches moved near the tree line. They did not advance. They only glowed in place. The watchers had not left. But now, the other side had come. From the west trail, boots scraped dirt. Lanterns swayed, rifles in hands, hats pulled low. It was not warriors, it was townsfolk. 5 men at first, then more. Mary, the grocer's wife, stood near the back, arms crossed. The preacher held a book. The blacksmith gripped an iron rod. They said nothing. Caleb stood alone behind the door. A rock hit the window. Glass shattered. The baby cried. Buck barked once, sharp. Then a man stepped forward. Big shoulders. White shirt rolled to the elbows. He pushed through the yard gate. Caleb opened the door just as the man reached the porch. The man said one thing. "Give her over." Caleb didn't move. The man shoved the door and stepped inside. The cradle sat near the hearth, glowing faint orange. From within, the child whimpered once. The red beaded bracelet shook gently on her wrist. The man reached down to grab the cradle. Buck lunged. Teeth met flesh. The man screamed and fell back, hand torn. Buck growled, blood on his mouth. The preacher shouted, "Call the dog off." But Caleb was already moving. He picked up the baby, slow and sure. Her fingers clutched the edge of his shirt. Her face pressed to his neck. Outside, the chanting had stopped. Now the town had fully circled the cabin. Guns up, faces hard. Caleb stepped out onto the porch. Buck followed, teeth still bared. Caleb said nothing. He stepped to the porch rail. He placed the cradle gently down, outside the door. Then he lowered the baby into it. She did not cry. The carved hawk glowed beneath her. The feather lay beside her still. Caleb stepped back. He knelt on the wood floor. Hands open, no weapon, no words. He looked at the townspeople first, then past them. Into the trees. The torches stayed still. No one moved. The wind shifted. The baby reached up toward the sky. The glow from the cradle pulsed once. One move, and it all ends. The sky held no wind that morning. Smoke from the chimney rose straight and slow. Caleb sat beside the cradle on the porch. The baby slept soundless. The red beaded bracelet wrapped loosely around her wrist. The carved hawk beneath her chest glowed like morning embers. From the trees they came, not in a rush, not with war. Elders first, then warriors, then singers, no war paint. No weapons drawn. At the front walked Elder Senka. She held a long staff wrapped in feathers and leather strands. Her eyes did not blink. The town stood frozen behind Caleb's gate. Sheriff Wayne gripped his rifle. Mary held her child tight. The blacksmith had not moved since nightfall. Caleb did not rise. Elder Senka stepped to the porch. She looked at the cradle. Then at Caleb. She did not speak right away. Behind her another elder sang. The words were low, deep, full of mourning. The song told of a woman's courage, of hiding, of sacrifice, of fire, of feathers in wind. It was the story of the child's mother. Caleb looked at the baby. The baby stirred and grabbed the bead bracelet, twisting it in her hand. Elder Senka placed her hand over the baby's heart. "She breathes the old line," Elder Senka said. "And you kept her warm." Caleb looked down. Elder Senka reached into her robe and pulled out something small, the carved medallion. She held it out. "For you," she said. "You are now part of her story." Caleb took it. His hands shook. The sheriff stepped forward, rifle still raised. His voice was tight. "Is this over?" Elder Senka didn't answer. The baby sat up in the cradle, blinked and smiled. Sheriff Wayne lowered the rifle. The blacksmith exhaled. The warriors turned back toward the trees, moving slow. No sound followed. Then came the twist. Children from the town broke through the crowd. No one stopped them. 4 boys, 2 girls, one no more than 3 years old. They walked right up to the porch and sat down on the step. A boy pointed at the carving on the cradle. "You made that?" the boy asked. Caleb nodded. "Can you teach me how?" Caleb looked at the medallion in his hand. He closed his fingers around it, then looked at the children. "I can," Caleb said. Buck lay down beside them. The baby laughed for the first time, and then Caleb cried. Not like when the fever came. Not like when the barn was quiet. This was something else. The children didn't laugh, they didn't run, they sat still. They'd never seen a man cry like that. The fire circle glowed soft in the night. Logs cracked, sparks lifted into the sky. Children laughed somewhere near the river. Weeks had passed since the stand on the porch, since the cradle glowed, since the rifle dropped. Caleb walked the camp path slow. The baby sat high on his shoulder, one hand gripping his shirt. Buck the dog limped beside them. His wound had healed mostly. The scar stayed, but so did the fire in his eyes. Around Caleb's wrist hung the red beaded bracelet, now strung, tight on a leather cord. The beads clicked softly as he moved. The elders nodded as Caleb passed. One boy ran up and showed him a carved stick. "Like yours," the boy said. Caleb smiled. The baby laughed. The sound was light and full, like sunlight in winter. It was the first laugh Caleb ever heard from her. They sat by the fire. Others gathered close. Some braided rope. Some passed food. Some sat in silence. The flames lit the baby's face. Her eyes watched everything, wide awake, remembering. Caleb pulled the bracelet from his wrist and turned it in his hand. The beads glowed red, just like the night he found her. Just like the night the cradle rocked on its own. He looked down at her. "Lorna," Caleb said. The baby looked up at him and laughed again. Buck let out a low sound from beside the log. A deep growl. Caleb turned quick, but there was no threat. Just Buck. Just a yawn. No danger. Just firelight. Just peace. Across the flame, a small boy stared at the baby. His skin was pale, his clothes torn, his eyes unsure. He leaned close to his mother and whispered, "Who is she?" The mother answered, quiet, but clear. The boy had her eyes. The wind rose. The fire shifted. Caleb looked up at the stars, then back at the girl in his arms. She curled against his chest, eyes closing. The red bead flickered once more, then stilled. The morning mist hung low over the valley. Caleb stepped, outside with a small blade in his hand. The edge needed cleaning. The baby slept inside, curled in a wool blanket. Buck lay under the porch, ears twitching at every breeze. That's when Caleb saw him. A young man stood still at the edge of the camp path. No weapons, no shoes, a cedar pouch tied to his belt. The stranger didn't speak. He looked once at Caleb, then at the cradle inside the door. Caleb nodded once. The young man stepped forward, slow and careful, as if he knew the ground carried. "Wait!" Caleb, the carpenter, stepped aside. Inside, the fire was warm. The baby cooed but did not wake. The young man sat by the hearth. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a thin block of cedar. Then he waited. Caleb knelt beside the cradle. He touched the carved hawk, the mark left by Elder Senka. He opened a small cloth and showed the young man the painted feather, still whole. Then he unwrapped the carved medallion and placed it beside the feather. The stranger said nothing, but he reached for a carving blade. Caleb handed it to him. The young man turned the cedar block once, then twice, studying its shape. Then he pressed. the tip of the blade into the cradle's wood, just beside the hawk. He carved slow. A shape took form, another hawk, but this one with wings spread wide, as if flying toward something unseen. The edges were sharp. The wings reached the top edge of the cradle's side. Caleb watched without speaking. Outside, children played near the water. Buck stirred in his sleep. The baby shifted, then settled. The young man wiped the edge of the blade clean. Then he spoke. "My brother carried her." Caleb turned. The young man didn't look up. "He was the one who brought her to you." Caleb placed a hand on the medallion. The one Coda had dropped in the grass, the third proof token. The young man looked at the fire. "I followed his path. All the way here." Caleb nodded once. Nothing more was said. The young man stood and looked down at the twin hawks on the cradle's side. One old, one new. He bowed low, then left the cabin without turning back. Caleb sat alone beside the fire, blade still in hand. The baby stretched her fingers toward the hawks. The glow from the wood caught her eyes. She smiled. Outside, the fog lifted. The hills cleared. He carved without speaking, because the story didn't need words. The lodge fire burned low in the center of the gathering place. Smoke curled soft into the sky. The sun had dipped behind the hills, and the last light turned. The grass gold. Caleb walked with the cradle in his arms. The same one carved in silence, marked with two hawks. The base still held the shape of the knot, the one that had glowed when it all began. He set the cradle near the fire, not hidden, not guarded, just there, open to all. Children came before. The first star appeared. Some wore deer hide, some wore boots with holes, some had dark braids, some had sunburned cheeks. They came from both sides, tribe and town. They sat in a circle, cross-legged, fingers pressed into dirt. They waited without being told. Buck lay near the cradle, stretched on his side. No growl in his chest, no bark on his tongue, just peace. His tail twitched in his sleep. His nose jerked once, chasing something in his dream. Caleb, the carpenter, sat nearby, not on a chair, not behind a wall, just on the earth. Sometimes, when the wind picked up, he would pull the child into his arms and hold her while the sparks drifted up. She'd press her face to his chest and hum soft against the night air. The other children would scoot closer. No one told them to stay back. No one asked whose child she was anymore. The red beaded bracelet no longer lived on her wrist. It now circled. Caleb's, tied with a knot made by a tribal elder. It clicked lightly when he moved. Each night when the flames dimmed, Caleb would run his thumb across the beads, slow, steady, like prayer. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The cradle still glowed, not bright, just enough. Enough to catch a child's eye, enough to mark its place. Once a boy asked, "Was she really from the fire?" Caleb nodded. "And you?" the boy asked. Caleb looked at the medallion tucked near his belt. "I'm just the one who caught her." They all laughed. No one knocked on the door anymore. There was no need, because the door never closed, not after that night. The wind moved through the trees. Buck opened one eye, then shut it again. Caleb leaned back, hand resting on the cradle. The red bead on his wrist caught the firelight, one last flicker before the flames went quiet.